Hi, my name's Kevin McQuillan, and the following pre-recorded conversations are my attempt to make sense of the human experience through the practice of yoga. I hope you enjoy. So the premise of a gathering together is that we basically attempt to shape the day and introduce you to a theme for the day. And so we'll do this every single morning. We'll gather, we'll have a conversation, and introduce you to the theme of the day that will give you plenty of opportunities to practice into. And so the premise is that you make this theme relevant in your life. Whatever theme we're speaking about, you make it relevant. Because otherwise, what is it? It's just some hollow concept. Some hollow concept. And we don't want it to remain a hollow concept. It's you explore it and make it real in your life. To actually source where it is in your life, where it's been, where it is, and where it may be in the future. Because that's how they present themselves, these themes, these concepts, the human experiences that we have when we share it together. And so this morning, and not just this morning, really the premise of this program is to explore the two distinctions up on the board. I'm inherently good. That's not true. And this program is designed to answer that question, to define these concepts, and that you do that on your own in various different ways. I'm inherently good. That's not true. I'm very curious when you start poking around into these concepts, and these two in particular, and to see what arises and what comes up. And so I'm going to attempt to explain how this has shown up for me. And I'll give you a current example. Last night I mentioned to you I've been quite tender. Quite tender over the last several days. And that is still true today. And where I'm most tender is here, my kidneys. And what I know of kidneys is it's a source of, or an area where we hold fear. And I've been working through fear. And it's been very intriguing for me to explore my experience. And exploring in a way that I've been kind of tormenting and haunting myself through practice, because there's something I've known that's there waiting to be explored. And the experience that I've been having over the last several days has proven that to be true. So much so, this experience woke me up in the middle of the night last night. It's like haunting me, even in my sleep, which is rare. But it's like, okay. And this realization came to me. And it's like, there you are. There you are. Something I've been tracking for a long time that I knew was present, but I couldn't define. And it's aligned to these distinctions. And it's the clearest way I could say it is that it's my relationship to women. My relationship to women and how complex that's been for me in my life. Oh, disturbingly so. And it's like haunted and tormented me in so many different ways, but it's also been a wonderful source of learning and growth and exploration and transformation and all these kinds of things. So it's been confusing. That women have been a source of torment and pain, I think is one way of putting it in my life. And then the opposite of that. And what came to me, what woke me up last night, is this experience I have of this archetype of the devouring mother. That's what came to me. That woke me up in the middle of the night. It's like, oh, wow. And some qualities associated with the devouring mother is codependent, and devours, the devouring mother. And devours, more specifically in my life, either out of disappointment or desperation. That's how it seemed to me. That's how it seems to me. That I've been a great source of disappointment for women. I don't necessarily want to talk about this, but I'm talking about it anyways because I need to articulate it, to get it out of me. This is the way it has seemed to me. I'm not saying it's true, but women, I've been a great source of disappointment for women in my life. That's how it seems to me. And that when that's presented itself to me in my life, it has devoured me. And the opposite, which is less prevalent in some ways, out of desperation, clinging to me and then will attempt to devour me through the desperation. And so what that's left me, the posture that's left me in is frightened. And I don't like saying that out loud, because that's not how I like to be seen. But that's the reality inside. Ooh, I am petrified in so many different ways, and that's what's been so intriguing for me. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Scared, yes, I get that. But to the degree in which I see it now and the clarity that's here for me, it's like, wow, this is so fascinating. This is how I've been orientating myself in the world, and specifically with women. No wonder it's been so challenging. And these examples I've experienced over the last couple of days. I went for a massage. I explained this to a few of you. And it was like torture. And I felt so fragile. And I wanted to go and just be nurtured. And that's not what I got. It's not what I got. It was like 60 minutes of unpleasantries is what it felt like. It's like, okay, what am I learning from this? Aha. Okay, thank you for the lesson.
The irony was that was my gift to him.
It's like, And then, you know, I've had some experiences of disappointment lately, and with guests, which is for me is very difficult to deal with, because there's so much lineage attached to disappointment. Especially with women, it's like, of course. And what it takes for me to posture myself in those conversations, because I feel like I'm failing. I've disappointed you, I failed, I can never do enough and be enough. And what's going to follow probably is you'll devour me, or at least attempt to. And it's absurd to have these visions, but that's the posture I'm in, of protection. And it's left me scrambled in a whole host of different ways. And it's cost me a lot in my life, there's no question about that. It's cost me my own safety and security, and it's cost me plenty in relationships for sure. And what I've noticed through this experience is that I have a tendency to be attracted to rough women, which is a weird thing to say. They don't look rough. Like, does she look rough? It's like, no, but she's rough at times. And especially when Serena's disappointed, which can be often. And that's in some ways what she comes from, is being perpetually disappointed. And it's like, of course I chose you, just to torture myself a bit here. And I'm not saying that's the case all the time, but my experience of Serena, when she gets disappointed, she's rough. Like flounders around in bed and like whips the sheets off and these kinds of things, like, oh, I'm about to be eaten. Is my experience, and I've noticed that now. It's like, wow.
And that's about you.
It's not about you. It's not about me, but that's what it feels like.
Okay.
And I make it about me at times. It's like, ee! And scared little Kevin pops out. And this isn't safe. You're not safe. Protect. And if I wasn't willing to do something about that, this wouldn't work. That's for sure. I would let this side of me take over and consistently see Serena as a threat. And she is. For me, absolutely. A terrible, terrible threat. And she is the representation of the devouring mother, the monster, the dragon, in various different ways. And It's a weird thing to say because she doesn't look like that. But I can see her as that at times. And what I've also linked into is the frightened Kevin, the little lad that lives within, petrified and helpless. And I know that experience well, that feeling of helplessness and how deep that goes. It's also attached to the monster that lives within me. The monster that will come out in the attempt to protect, that creates absolute chaos and looks to dominate and punish. And I know that side of me very, very well. That's how I lived most of my life, allowing that side of me to dictate my actions in the world. Because I felt helpless. I don't want to feel and present myself as helpless, so I'll present myself as the monster. And in that, people may be intimidated. If that's the case, they'll stay away from me. And if people are away from me, there's less opportunities to be devoured. And that's the position that I played out in many different ways, in many different relationships in my life, and it's so crystal clear to me right now. It's like, And so with respect to these themes, I'm inherently good. That's not true. And that's my position. I'm not inherently good. I know that. If I'm attached to the frightened Kevin and the monster that lives within, there's nothing good about that. There's nothing good that comes from that. I'll perpetually torment myself and create conflict and chaos in my life. And so if I posture myself in that side of myself, I am not inherently good. And it takes a tremendous amount of effort to be good in this world. We all know that. Especially if we don't know what we're up against. And I've known what I've been up against in various different ways, but to this level of clarity, no. And it's been deeply painful to align myself to this lesson that I needed to learn. It's been horrifically painful over the last several days. But it's like turned me and ripped me inside out. That's how it's felt. And back here, the tenderness, it's just like I have this opportunity to release the grip and let go of the fear, and that's what's happening. You know, and it's this practice, these practices. I've been shaping my teaching over the years, so it's absolutely lethal. And I use it on myself as the guinea pig. I am the guinea pig. And I want to know what these practices do, and this approach and this methodology and how lethal it can be. And I want my teaching approach to be absolutely lethal. There's no escape. That's the idea. And I've proved that there can be no escape if we take on these practices in the right way. And that's useful. And I see yoga as that, is the death of identity. What are you willing to allow to die? When you lay out on your mat in Shava, what's dying? What are you choosing? What are you allowing? What are you giving up? It's the practice of dying. And there's a tremendous amount of sacrifice attached to that. Absolutely. But it's also deeply rewarding if we're willing to move into that space. To do it on our own is very difficult. We know that. Very difficult. And the chances of doing it on our own are almost zero. And if you think about your own life, you'll have some examples of that. Some of the things that have been around in your life that have tormented you have been around for a long time. Maybe even a lifetime. And so we're better off doing things together in community. The ability to create support, trust, respect, and bravery within a group setting, is incredible. There's nothing quite like it. And one of the reasons why we pursue relationships the way in which we pursue relationships, there's something we know inherently that's good for us to be in relationships if we position ourselves that way. And that's what this approach is designed to do, to really get to allow you to see yourself and how you relate to yourself, and from that, how you relate to others. And in this program, what you'll notice is you'll start to define your belief system through this experience. We're going to strip you down so you can really see yourself and understand why you are who you are. It is so specific through language and practice and clarity. It will be undeniable at some point for you to see yourself. That will be the only choice you'll have, is to be able to see yourself. And the way in which you need to see yourself, which is aligned to the side of you that does not want good things in your life, where you're not inherently good. And if you're able to integrate that side of you, that's where change really starts to manifest. And so that's the attempt through this experience, this program, this methodology. Our approach as a whole is to get you to a place where you can see yourself like really. Not the pretense, not the costumes, not the face masks, not all any of that stuff. It's like right down to the core of you. And that's going to show up in 5 sentences. We're going to boil you down to 5 sentences. That's what's going to happen. And once you know these 5 sentences and the unique language you have associated with these 5 sentences, things will change for you. And that's what's so difficult about change. We don't really know what we're up against. And once you know what you're up against, then you can actually make change, and the kind of change you want to make. And so that's the attempt here. How does that seem to you? Exciting and horrifying? Yeah. Yeah. And good. You know, it's kind of like on this edge of our seat kind of experience at times, right? It's like, wow, I don't know about this. I don't know about this. If you ever bungee jumped or something like that, right? It's like, yeah, what am I doing? This is totally unnatural.
There are no mistakes. There's no mistake that you're here, all of you, guests included. There's no mistake that you are here in this moment, in this conversation, together with each other. There's no mistake that I am this match for Kevin and he is my match. You know, if this is his work, I'm here to bring that to him, and that is my work also. You know, I come from a very critical family, very critical family. And this has not been easy work for me to break that. You know, there was never praise. It was like a criticism was almost considered, like, it wasn't as bad a criticism, so it was a compliment. You know, it's very relative. And so for me, when I communicate that and how I communicate with Kevin, it's so stark for me that I didn't, it's like, you know, he'll take it as a criticism. I'm like, that's not a criticism. That's like almost a compliment. Practically a compliment.
Almost.
It's like on the verge of like...
It's wrapped that way, it just doesn't feel that way.
Right. But see how relative it is for me. And so for me, it's like, okay, how do I push past that and break that, push past it where I feel a compliment or an appreciation, to express appreciation. There's no language. There's actually no language, no word for thank you in Indian culture. The word thank you doesn't actually exist. It's like there's versions of it, but like to show appreciation or to say appreciation, it's sort of like understood that you appreciate it. So for me to actually voice appreciation, put words to it, it's like, that's painful for me. I remember the first time I like appreciated him we went to get our car insurance or something. And we had to go from place to place to place to place, and they wouldn't take this, and they wouldn't take cash, and there was like massive lineups. Anyways, it took the entire day. And I came home and I was like, wow, we just spent the entire day for something that should have taken maybe, I don't know, an hour. And that was the last thing I knew Kevin wanted to do. His was really quick. Mine was, of course, took forever. And so I came back home and I was like, I have to say this. Like, it was like, thank you. I mean, getting better at it, yeah?
Yep.
But I was like, thank you for taking the time to go from place to place to place all day. I know it was the last thing you wanted to do today. And it went it was really hard for me to do, because for me it was like, oh, he just knows I'm grateful. He just knows that I appreciate that. But for me to actually voice it was very important. And, I think that was like that moment for me. It was like, okay, the push through to do something really uncomfortable, to appreciate something, and then it got easier over time. This is a while ago. So now it's like, okay, now keep doing that. Keep coming forth. Keep bringing the appreciation. Keep thanking, grateful. I'm so grateful for all of the things, and for him as well. And so he needs to hear that. And so I have to get past it's sort of a compliment. So it's work for both of us on both ends. And there's a reason why, there's a person here that in my life that needs to hear that.
So that's one of the elements to this, is that we need certain things, and we know that. And to identify what our needs are. And that's also the attempt during your time here, is to identify your needs. And to be able to stand for those needs, and to be able to communicate them. So those that you say that you care for, love, and want to have in your life. And so there's lots of phases and lots of sides to this conversation. But through this time, our time, over the next many days, we'll continue to deepen and explore these two experiences. And the idea is that you can convince yourself that telling the truth on yourself is a good idea. Because ultimately telling the truth is curative and redemptive. And so this is what I shared with you. It's like I'm sweating. It's like, that's my experience. I'm so bloody hot right now. But I know this is good. It's curative. This is redemptive. It was good for me to say, to get it out. And look what's happening here. I'm doing it in front of predominantly women. And that takes a lot for me to do. It's like, don't devour me, please. Ashley, do not devour me. Like these kinds of experiences. And it's like this weird illusion that we can live in. But to be able to puncture some holes in it, it's like, okay, there's some air. I don't have to suffocate myself. And to build out another side of myself, and that's the attempt here. That I need more, not only of myself, but those that are around me. To cultivate and create the kind of nurturing that I need and I deserve. And that's a hell of a stance to take. That's also a weird thing to say out loud. But that's what I need from myself. And teach others to treat me that way. And so that's the attempt as I move myself along. Because now I see this in a whole new way. And most importantly, I feel it in a whole new way. And so now I can build something new. It's like, okay, die, create space, create something new. And so that's what we'll attempt to do through practice. And that's what's coming to you next. We'll explore the practices that are coming to you. And just out of curiosity, just to shape this and to close this conversation out, what did you hear in this conversation? Anything strike you? Anything come up you'd like to share? How did you hear this? Did it make sense? Could you see yourself somewhere in it? Yeah, thank you. What you'll discover is, where are you living your life from? Which side of you? And that's the discovery. If you have the capacity and skill set to live from your values, that's a great place to live from. How often do you live from there? And that's the question posed to each of you. And my experience of plenty is don't even know their values. Plenty of people don't even know their values. If they don't know their values, it's very difficult to live from our values. And so what we're living from typically is this space of feeling scared and fearful and a shame-based experience and a life of protection. And that's where we act weird in various different ways and create a lot of chaos in our life. And so that's the discovery that you get to go through during our time together. Where are you actually living your life from? And you'll see very clearly, and it'll be very interesting. I appreciate you bringing that up. Yeah. And it's a difficult concept to grapple with. It's like, huh?
That's the point.
You know, there's some controversy attached to that, and that's good. Yeah. It is very complex being a human being. Good Lord, it is very complex being a human being. And the tendency is to present ourselves like we got our shit together. That's the tendency, isn't it? I'm totally fine. It's like, uh-huh. And so, you know, it takes a lot, and it's this great act of vulnerability to share the things we don't necessarily want to share. And we're better off doing such a thing. And so that's the invite here, is we want you as you are, not who you're supposed to be and the pretense and all that kind of stuff. It's like who you are, really. You know, where things are working and great and wonderful and where they're not. And let's have those kinds of conversations. And we can learn a lot from each other as we move through our time together. So I really appreciate you hearing me, us, being here the way in which you are, listening the way in which you're listening, and making this relevant in your life.